The newest Dragon Ball movie, Dragon Ball Super, crushed it in the box office and made over $100 million. The movie is largely based on Gohan's return as a Z fighter. And this is a little known fact, but he's actually supposed to be the main character of Dragon Ball Z. Fortunately for us, Akira Toriyama decided to go with the main character, Goku. But the old rivalry between Vegeta and Goku is getting kind of stale, so I'm glad they decided to shake things up a little bit. This obviously isn't the first time Gohan's gone berserk and awakened his new powers. The first and the best time that it's happened is actually here when he's fighting against Cell. As usual, all the materials we're using today is going to be in the description below. But let me actually show you the paper we're going to be working with. It's regular computer paper, and here's the cube location and the cube size. And I'll include that in the description as well. That's all there is to it, so let's go ahead and get started with the drawing process. We're going to start this one off as usual by drawing the outside of his face, and we're going to stop a little below that center line. His chin is going to be smaller than usual, and that's because he's looking slightly upwards. Same thing on the other side. We're going to keep everything pretty even. The next thing we're going to do is draw the crease between his eyes. Now, it's not going to be as, the wrinkle is not going to be as defined because he's not staring at you with as much intensity. So we're just going to draw those two lines there, and maybe one more line underneath of that. But that's about it, and we're going to be good to go and continue with drawing his eyes. So the first line we're going to draw is going to be the top of his eyelid or the bottom of his eyebrow. And you can see how far below the center line it is right there. The next thing we'll do is draw the bottom of his eyelids. Make sure we create some space on both sides, especially towards the outside of his face. And that middle line there is pretty much where we're going to stop, but we're going to curve it out just so it doesn't look so blocky. And we'll wrap things up here by drawing his pupil. And the top of his eyebrow, we're actually going to stop at the right on the center line. I'll give you a little guideline right there for reference. And we'll just work our way down towards the bottom. As we go towards the bottom of the eyebrow, it's going to get smaller and smaller, but not too small. And we'll just repeat the same thing on the other side. Over here, I've got my paper taped down, but feel free to move your paper around a little bit just to make it easier for your wrist to create those curves. Yeah, it can get a little tricky on the left side, especially if you're right-handed. So same thing, we're going to create some space on both sides for the bottom of his eye. Create a little curve there, the pupil, and then we'll actually let's go ahead and make this a little bit wider. It seems a little small compared to the other side. And actually, let's make the top of that eyebrow, the bottom of the Cool. So let's draw the top of the eyebrow over here. We'll do the same thing as the other side. Start small, get larger towards the top of the eyebrow. And that's it. So now for the nose, you see these two red guidelines. This is where I should have drawn his nose. So I drew it a little bit too low. And it's going to look, I don't actually catch it till later on down the road. But just for your reference, everything else I did with the nose was correct. I just didn't place it high enough. So just try to place it between those two red guidelines that I showed you earlier. And a little bit below his nose, we're going to draw his mouth. It's not going to be directly connected, but it's going to be pretty close to his nose. And most of his mouth I'm going to draw on his left side. And just a little bit on the other side, to create a little smirk. Not a smirk, but half of his mouth is going up, the other half is down. And here's the bottom lip. As you can probably notice, his jaw is a little bit too sharp and unrealistic looking, so we're going to go ahead and fix the corners there, as well as the chin itself, and just make sure that we round everything off. The next step is to draw the lines below his eyes. We'll actually start off with a solid line, and just to give us the direction, and after that we'll break it up into smaller parts. Cool, pretty easy. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Actually, now that I look at it, his right side is going off a little bit too steep of an angle. So we're going to go ahead and even it out. And the lines over the eyes are always going to be much easier. You just want to make sure that you go in the same direction as his eyebrows, and follow the same curvature of his eyebrows as well. Let's make this eye a little bit, just like a hair thinner, the eyebrow as well, because we want to make sure we make some space for his sideburns. And we're going to follow that all the way around that square. We're going to follow that line all the way around that square to make up his hairline. And we're going to stop right there because that area is going to get cut off by one of his top hairs anyways. So no point in drawing and erasing all that. And let's actually draw that top hair right now. So we want to stop above his eyebrow and then cut right outside of his eyebrow, all the way down to below his eye. And we'll just work our way back to the top. Okay, cool. So one more line here around his temple, and we'll be able to start drawing his ears. So for his ears, I'm going to give you some guidelines just to give you an idea of where we're supposed to be stopping and starting here. And those guidelines basically define the center of those two cubes. So you want to start a little bit above the center of the bottom cube and right around the center of the top cube. And we'll draw a little S shape here. And don't worry about the rest of the ear for now. We'll draw the details later. But that S shape is going to make up the general shape of the details inside of his cube. And for the other side, we'll try to follow the same guidelines. But to be honest with you, for the source image, the right side is smaller from the left side for some reason, and which is fine because the source image looks great. So if you make it a little bit smaller, even if you want to make it the same size, I don't really think it matters either way. Over here, I try to make them match because I'm thinking about it a little bit too obsessively. But like I said, if you leave one of them smaller than the other, or the right side smaller than the left side, it'll look just fine. All right, we're finally done with his face for now, and we're ready to start work on the rest of his upper body. Now I'm going to start drawing this line over here that's going to go all around his torso, and it's going to define his shoulders as well as his rib cage. Sorry, not his shoulders, his traps as well as his rib cage. And it's not going to go all the way to, I drew a little reference line there, and that's going to make up the space between the cube and the side of the page. So it's not going to be quite in the middle there. It's going to be a little bit inside. And by the way, the bottom of this oval that we're drawing here is going to be like a hair more than an inch from, I'd say about an inch from the bottom of the page, but maybe a hair more than that. If you draw an inch, you should be fine. Yeah, I think an inch should be fine. And notice for his chest, from the bottom, it's starting to curve downward, and from the top, it is starting to curve upward. So it forms a nice little V shape there. There go his traps, and we'll just draw the rest of the details for his neckline, as well as his chest, and we'll continue with the rest of the drawing after that. Okay, so this is real important. We're going to draw the outline for his collar. And once we have this shape down, it's going to cut through about half of his chest, maybe a little more than that. And then towards the bottom, it's going to cut back in. Once we get this shape down, then we'll be ready to go to start drawing the tears and battle damage to his shirts. So you can see on the outside it doesn't cut in as sharply, but towards the ends on his left side it cuts in a lot more. For his shoulder on the outside, you'll notice that I'm not covering up that original oval that I created. That's because his chest is going to be covering his shoulder there due to the angle. And we're going to continue that by completing the rest of his shirts, which is also going to cover up that arm and shoulder. Now, on the other side, you'll see that, well, on the source image, first of all, his left arm is kind of cut off. They stopped there, so I had to use my imagination to complete it. But on that side, his shoulder isn't really so much blocked off. There are some tears there on the shirt that cover it up a little bit, but for the most part, his left arm is dominant, and you'll be able to see his shoulder, his bicep, his tricep, all the details on his arm. You'll notice I left a little space there towards the bottom untouched, and that's because we're going to cover that up with a shadow anyways later on, so there's really no point in adding any more details there for now. Alright, it is time to finally draw his hair. I will say this, you do want to draw that line all the way through the center line to the top of the page, because that's going to give us a good reference to draw the rest of his hairs. There is going to be one hair towards the middle there, but first we're going to draw the two hairs around it. And they may look similar size, but don't make the mistake of drawing them as twin mirror images of each other. The one on the left side of his page is going to start a little bit lower and end a little bit lower than the hair on the right side of his face. Above that, there's going to be two more hairs we're going to draw before we get to the hair in the middle, and these are going to be much larger than the first two hairs that we drew, and they have to be, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see them. They'd be getting covered up by the hairs in the front. Now finally we're going to draw the last hair, and though it is in the middle, the point is going to be off center a little bit, so just keep that in mind. Alright, cool. So that was the hard part, believe it or not. The rest is actually going to be very easy, because we're just gonna go work our way down from the top of the page, and keep in mind there is a little bit of a curve going down. It's not gonna be like a straight angle, if that makes any sense. but you shouldn't have too much problems with it, to be honest with you. Just use the source image as a guideline and work your way down towards the bottom. Keep in mind not to miss any of the hairs, and use the cube and the previous hairs as a reference so that you make sure that you don't draw too far away from the middle. Am I ranting on here too much? You get the point. Yeah, just just make sure you don't draw his hair too big or too small. That's all I'm trying to say. Alright guys, there isn't really too much more for me to add here. The rest of the tutorial is pretty much just me adding the details over the lines that we've already created. So yeah, not really too much more for me to add. If you feel like I missed something or I could have explained something better, or if there's another thing that I could add to these tutorials to make it easier to follow along, please go ahead and leave something in the comments below, and I'll definitely take your comments into consideration. I'll do whatever I'm interested in doing whatever I can to help improve these tutorials and make them easier to follow along. The rest of the videos, like I said, is just me adding details. So yeah, see you in the next tutorial.